Welcome back to Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg, and I know everybody listening is shocked at the outcome of this week's episode. Except, of course, that's exactly what I predicted last week. Uh, my co-host,
Oh,
Jessica Lewis, almost convinced me to change my mind on what was going to happen, but I'm glad I held on to it.
I did. Because here's the thing, and this is something that I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about. One of the reasons why I came to the conclusion I did was because, gosh, we were seeing a lot of Banu, and gosh, I
Yes,
feel like that should mean something, right?
it
And
did.
it shouldn't mean that he's just going to get voted off the next episode.
Yeah, they needed
So
to
I,
pack in all their Banu content.
but they didn't need to.
No, they didn't. You're right.
No.
Um,
So that was why I came up with my Kenzie theory. Maybe I read too much into the edit and maybe I shouldn't have done that.
mhm,
But yes, that was why.
yes.
I came close to convincing you though.
You did.
I really
You
did.
did.
Mhm.
I'm glad I didn't let you. Now you're
Mm,
never going to convince me because I got
no,
this one right.
like I've
So,
ever really
no.
affected you much. Yeah, no. We
Ah,
we both know that I'm very bad at my
predict-
predictions. So don't ever put any stock into anything Jessica says as far
yeah.
as predictions are concerned because it's not going to bode well for you.
Yeah. Well, I said last week, speaking of lots of Banu, that in talking about all those things Banu did before we got to the rules, I risked us discussing why Banu lost a week early.
You
However,
did.
I also said I was sure he'd do more to make things even worse. I was right about both. We still have plenty to discuss. Lucky everybody. Uh, now, so even though it might seem obvious why Banu was voted out, to the point that they didn't even go through the formality of writing down his name, we have to make
Mhm.
sure we get all the details so nobody ever goes through this again. To do that,
Fair point.
yeah. To do that, we'll compare his game to my rules for winning that I originally wrote way back after season one and have been updating ever since, using all the non spoiler information available to us from what we saw on TV, interviews, social media, and secret scenes. The newest version of the rules can be found on the robhasawebsite.com/yxlost feed website and clicking on the link bubble for the Survivor rules. Now, speaking of those rules, one thing I want to particularly mention is that in the introduction to the rules, I specifically note the other presumption here, and I know it sounds silly, but it needs to be said, is that the player actually wants to win the game.
Yes.
They shouldn't be there for the experience or to face the toughest opponent or whatnot. Or rather, they can be if they want, I suppose, but those are not the people who we're focused on here. Survivor is a
Mhm.
game, and the goal is to win, period.
Mhm.
That is the basic
Mhm.
assumption here, and these rules can lead good players to that end goal. To quote Harry, a super fan on Australian Survivor, people should play to win.
100%. Yes. There shouldn't be a desire to win a million hearts and not win $1,000,000. You can want to do both. I
Yeah.
think both would be lovely. If you can win a million hearts and win $1,000,000, excellent. Kudos to you.
Hmm.
But it shouldn't be, I'll take that over the $1,000,000.
Right.
No.
Right.
Mm-mm.
Now, before we address how Banu did in terms of the rules, we always have some other things to discuss from this week's episode. And the first one involves Banu. Um, some people, mostly on
Crazy.
mostly on Facebook, but also on Twitter, have been suggesting that Banu is acting.
Mm.
Their evidence is that he's an actor, and for those of you just listening, big air quotes on that, with an IMDb page. Yeah, well, he's a dancer too. Does that mean he was dancing? No. And he was not acting. Acting is not even anywhere near his primary job. If you actually read his IMDb page, he's been in some shorts and he's had roles like guy on the street, uncredited. I mean, it's not his profession. The fact that someone has done a few very minor acting jobs does not mean they are acting in everything they do. And it's frankly ridiculous how wedded to this conspiracy belief some people have gotten.
Yeah, I do think that there's something to be said about some of the things that we did see him doing that were a
Mhm.
little head scratching, but I think it was likely more just a combination of all of the things
Yes.
coming together for Banu, right? It was the overwhelming nature of the game, it was his emotional state, it was all of these things.
Mhm.
And you have all these stressors on you, and then he's starting to behave in a way or act. And when I
Right.
say act, I don't mean like acting in a way
Mhm.
that makes you go, well, that's strange. But I can't imagine that CBS would have said, "Hey, here's a creative idea. Let's get
Gee.
this guy to come
Yes.
on the show and have him act, and we'll make sure that he's out like by episode 4, but we're just going to throw him in there to kind of like stir the pot and see what happens." They don't need to do that. You know
Well,
why they don't need to do that?
I
Because
don't
people like Banu exist.
right, and I don't think at least most of the conspiracists are saying CBS had a specific hand in it. They're saying Banu came on and lied to everyone so he could
Mm.
be an actor and use this as his way to get into, like, major films and TV.
Well, if
But
that was his goal, he definitely failed at it too. I
yes!
mean, come on.
I mean
What? This
I
is
mean,
not how you get a movie role.
yeah, and not only that, under this conspiracy belief, if he was really acting to get roles in the future, he would have to say he was acting,
Mm,
right?
mhm.
But in none of the interviews I read or listened
Right,
to or watched did he even hint it. Quite the opposite. He reemphasized his previously stated reasons for wanting to be on Survivor.
right.
So, how is he supposedly planning on getting acting jobs if he doesn't say he was acting? You can't have
Mm.
it both ways. It makes no sense.
Maybe he was waiting until the end of the season to be
Oh,
like,
yeah, and then it's gonna be a big reveal. I'm sure some people would say that. You wouldn't
Yeah.
believe some of the responses I got, and when I ask for evidence, they either run away or they block me. Literally,
Oh,
that's what they do.
well,
Um,
there.
yeah, and, I mean, the other thing is, like you said, if this was supposed to be an acting audition, I wouldn't hire him. I'm sorry.
No.
It was
It was
way
bad acting. It was
melodramatic. Yeah.
bad.
And the funniest part of the segment with Q coaching him was that Banu was failing the acting part.
Right. Yeah.
And, and so I'm sure the conspiracy nuts who believe this would respond, well, he was acting to pretend that he couldn't act.
Well, I guess they've got
Yes.
it all figured out then, right?
Yes. Yes. So with that out of the
Hmm.
way, I have another Banu related item. And it's not, I mean,
Again, shocking.
yeah, it's not all Bonner related. It's more Jeff and production related. Because I made an offhand remark a few minutes ago about the tribe not even voting. And this has been a topic of conversation and consternation for some people
Mm,
because while it was obvious this time, it could be used as a strategy in the future. Or rather, if someone has a strategy that involves pretending it's going to be an easy vote and Jeff doesn't do this at that point, others could figure out that something is up. Now, you know, everybody listening knows, I'm usually one of the first to say something when I think Jeff messed up. I really just cannot get upset about this.
mhm.
Q said on Twitter that they were asked if they wanted to vote. No move was being made, and no need to waste more time and energy walking up those steps. And really, I appreciate that. Move it along. We know what's happening here. More importantly, I feel like this was a special case. There was literally nothing Banu himself could do. And it was very clear nobody else wanted to. Plus, Jeff would have known from other producers if something was up, like, say, Q planning to play an idol to save Banu and get Kenzie out. I know that those saying it was a bad decision actually use that as a point in their favor by saying, well, in the future, if Jeff doesn't bring it up, people could infer that there's something going on behind the scenes
Mm.
that they don't know about. And yes, I suppose so. And I also know that Stephen and Rob discussed this on Know It Alls. I side with Rob. Stephen was the more concerned one. Rob was like, yeah, but really? And I'm right there with Rob. I would also add one reason that I'm right there is it is just so unlikely that there will be a situation in the future like this one where everybody wants someone out
Mm,
and that person has essentially given up because they have no vote. They can't play a shot in the dark. They have nothing.
right.
So if it happens again and this situation screws something up for someone, fine. Come back at me. Come at me on Twitter at that point and say, David, you were wrong. You should have been concerned about that. I'm not losing sleep over it.
Well, I think this brings out an interesting point, though, about the issues with the way that the game is currently being played. And I'm not talking about the players, I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about production creating the game that the players have to play. Because when you run into a situation like this where someone has no vote, so
Mm-hmm.
then they can't use their shot in the dark. And so there's all of these extra components that exist because production has
Right.
created these new components to the game that essentially puts someone in a corner and there's no hope at all for them to do anything. And this is a perfect example of what is being lost, I think, with the game of Survivor, because voting was
Yes.
always the biggest component and what would happen at tribal council and who would go home and
Mm-hmm.
who would be voted out. And when you take everything away from a player, then we are losing the pure essence of what Survivor is. And it's supposed to be that ability to maybe have your voice heard through a vote. And I
Mm-hmm.
understand if three people have decided he's going home, there's very little that he can do. But the mere fact that you've taken away any ability for him to do anything, I just feel like we're losing sight of what the game is supposed to
Yes.
mean and what we're
Yeah.
supposed to be doing.
And the worst part about him losing his vote is he had no choice in the matter. He had no say
Right.
in the matter. He was
Right.
picked by
Nothing.
someone else, and then he drew a rock, and he had no option to not play the game. That's the
Right.
part I really don't like. If they're going to
Mhm.
send people on journeys, they have to give them a choice. There has to
Right.
be some
100%.
amount of personal responsibility. So if
Mhm.
he played it and lost, yeah, that was his choice.
Right.
You know, eh, don't don't set up situations where you have no choice and no choice
Right.
and then take away the vote.
Yeah. I think
So,
it's terrible. And it's
but
it's
it's
it's different.
dangerous.
Right.
Dangerous. Ooh.
Mhm. But it's different even with the, and I know we're going down kind of a rabbit hole here, but with the beware advantage where someone does have a choice where
Right.
they can go, "Oh, they've been told this is your beware advantage." And I
Yes.
guess maybe production is going, "Well, we don't tell them who has to go on on the boat to go on the journey.
But they
They get
did.
to choose." But
Liz
they,
chose.
well, but that's what I mean. So it's like you, so there's portions of this where
Hmm.
production can try to argue, well, no, no, we gave them a choice. No, you actually didn't give them a choice when
Right.
someone else is making that choice for them.
Yeah.
And there's all of these things that end up working against the person's game in a way that become just it's just not Survivor anymore when that's what's
I mean,
happening,
it's
because it
Survivor.
should be
It's
about
just,
choices.
and in this case, would it have mattered? No.
No, it
It
wouldn't
was
have,
just
but this is
the
a good example.
right. The extreme nature of this example shows, here's a guy who couldn't even offer up the one thing that every player should have, which is their
Right.
vote.
Yeah, and this is, I
So,
mean, it's I don't like it. I don't
yeah.
like
Yeah. All right. Well, now let's do what the episode did and move away from Banu for a few minutes before going back to him again. Um,
it.
we can start by talking about Jem, who, of course, found and then replanted the Beware Advantage clue to mess with people, and Maria found it. This led to a lot of fruitless digging and fun scenes of Jem being highly amused by it all. Uh,
And tweets about it being the poop spot for certain tribes who had
yes,
been there
several
previously.
tribes. They were digging through a lot of poop there.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh.
Um,
Maybe that's a sign we need to go somewhere other than Fiji.
yeah. Um, well, it's
Just
not
saying.
happening. I think
I
they signed a
know, I
contract for the
know.
next couple of years. So, um, but maybe they just need to have signs. Do not dig here. Warning. Beware. This is
Beware.
that's the beware and the beware advantage. You'll be digging through poop. Um,
Poop area.
yeah.
Beware. Yeah.
Now, It was more than just fun and games because when they couldn't find anything, Jem also encouraged the idea that Tim planted the advantage and said he was overcompensating by working so hard at digging to take suspicion off himself.
Mm.
People seem to be agreeing with that, at least for now, and we'll have to see what happens next week.
Yeah, it was nice to see her having such a good time with it.
Hmm.
And I do appreciate that she kind of thought that one through as well, that I want to throw people off and I want to make them think that it's something. And then she took it a step further and was
Hmm.
trying to blame it on someone else. And she did it all in a way that wasn't suspicious
Hmm.
and was very believable. So it will be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
Yeah. Now it was pointed out to me that at some time she's going to have to play that idol. And so people will know. She'd
Yes.
better let some people in on the secret before then.
Yes, because they might be upset that they were digging in poo
Yeah, well,
if they find out.
yeah. Well, they found out now if they're on Twitter.
They found out now,
Um,
but when they're on the island, maybe they didn't
yeah,
know.
yeah. Now, over on Nami, we found out a bit more about the tribe dynamics, specifically as they revolve around Soda. She thinks
My
she's
girl
tight.
Soda,
Yes.
keep her name out of your mouth, okay?
And I also say that to people on Twitter who were criticizing things about her that shouldn't be criticized. They were basically
Oh,
personally attacking her, and she
yes.
ended them. I mean, literally, by the time she was done with them, they had deleted their Twitter account.
I love that.
Yeah.
Good
So,
job, Soda.
yeah. Now, in the game, she thinks she's tight with Tevin and Hunter, plus she has the ears of everyone else, and she told us her head is in the game all the time. But unfortunately for her, others have noticed that her head is in the
Mhm.
game all the time. As Tevin said, she's playing the game a little too hard for me. And he sees how he's playing other people and worries she may be doing the same to him. Now, this is interesting considering what we heard from Randon in his interviews last week. And I wonder how much of this is a reaction to the seed he planted before he knew he was leaving. Because remember, he said he was trying to turn the target away from Venus and onto Soda.
Mhm.
And, the reasons that Tevin gave are awfully similar to what Randon said he had mentioned.
Listen, stay away from my girl Soda, okay? Come on. I need this, all right? I need a winner
You need to
in
pop.
my I do. I do. It's been very, very long since I've had a winner pick, and my last one was JT, which was forever ago. So come on, like, just leave her alone. She's doing great. She's having a good time. She's playing the game.
Hmm.
Tevin, you're doing great too. Join in, play together. It's all lovely. Just
Yes.
stop.
Yeah.
We all need to stop focusing on Soda. And
Yeah.
I was when they started to say her name at the towards the beginning of the episode, I'm like, "Okay, good, she's fine." They've mentioned her so soon. It's so early in the episode. Nothing will happen to Soda. So I was very
I
pleased.
mean, they mentioned Bhanu early in the episode, too. And,
You how can you not?
well,
That
yes.
he's been in every episode
Yes.
85% of the time of every
Yes.
episode. So,
Yes. Not
yeah, it
his
makes
fault,
sense.
production's fault.
No, and I
Yeah.
listen, I know that, and I know that we are going to be saying a lot of things about
Yeah.
Banu, and I don't know if you really addressed this very much,
I
but
will,
uh,
but yeah.
yeah, he's a great guy. He's
Yeah.
an absolutely great human being, lovely person all around.
Hmm.
Terrible Survivor player.
Yes.
It is
Hey,
what it is.
spoilers. We're not done yet. We're not to the rules yet. Come on.
We still
Okay.
trust me. There's a lot of things we'll talk
Yeah.
about, but he's a lovely human being. He
Yeah.
absolutely is.
Going back to Nami, as far as other players on the tribe, Hunter is thrilled by this idea because he sees Soda as competition for being close to Tevin. Personally, I think he also wants her to stop singing. But because the
I
look
feel
on
the
his
same.
face was just hilarious,
Yes,
just
yes.
absolutely hilarious. And then also during part of the song, you had Venus like sweeping. I said it looked like Cinderella. Everybody, the wicked stepsisters are having fun, and she's cleaning up and sweeping. Uh, so,
It's a great
uh,
broom.
yes. Now, uh, Liz, meanwhile, thinks that if Soda makes merge, she can win it all. So if Nami does go to tribal council, it sure doesn't look good for Soda.
Stop it.
I'm just saying.
Stop.
Well,
We are not doing that.
I mean, the other thing is first they'd have to lose a challenge. So good luck on
Right.
that.
Oh, and Hunter, what did Tevin say? As soon as Hunter gets those balls in
If
his
Hunter
hands, it's
gets them
over.
balls in his hand, it's done. It's possible I had that quote ready to go here because, yes, speaking of shocking results, Hunter won immunity for Nami. And
Mhm.
yeah, Hunter is going to need a really solid alliance going to merge because he is going to be a gigantic target thanks to the way
It's
he's
almost
performed.
like, I don't know, he built things at home and practiced,
Yes,
right?
yes. Yeah. So I know that there were some other things going on besides, of course, Banu. Um, but we'll leave those for now, or I'll be putting some of those in my TikToks at David Bloomberg TV. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss before we move on?
I don't know if now is necessarily the best time, but I know that there is a lot of I'm getting a little visitor here behind me.
Oh,
Here comes my dog.
ah,
I know that there is a lot of commentary happening about this season and just how it feels different. It feels not like Survivor, and I feel the same way. I feel like there's something that's just a little bit off right now. And I'm really hoping that things move in a different
yeah,
trajectory and that the game shifts and that there's just something because right now it just feels like we're just kind of dragging our feet to get through these episodes and I'm just not loving that.
yeah.
This is something I love watching and I love being a part of and I just feel myself watching these episodes and just going, "Oh, please, just
Well,
something more."
I think a large part of that is the excessive Banu content. And again,
Yeah.
not Banu's fault. He didn't
No.
make the editing choices.
Mhm.
That would be the editors and production in
Right.
general. And
Right.
they just chose to show every dang minute of him.
Yeah.
And the other problem is that because of the way they've been doing things, Yanu has lost every challenge or every immunity challenge, which means
Mhm.
there's a lot of focus on the same few people. And there's
Right.
only so many different ways those
Yeah.
people can interact. Those few
Sure.
people can interact. And so we're seeing it over and over and over
Mhm.
again in the first 4 episodes. And we're getting little
Right.
snippets of everybody else, but that's all they are because they haven't had to play the game.
Right. Yes. And this
Uh,
is why I feel like, and I know we've said it before, but
mhm.
I'm going to say it again. Let's go back to a
2
two tribe
tribes.
format.
Yes.
It's just such a better avenue to
Yes.
develop stories, to develop gameplay, to get to see more people as
Keep
opposed
things
to a very
interesting. Yes.
minimal amount of individuals. Yeah, it would
Yes.
be such an incredible thing to say, "Hey, here's like and oh, I
Right.
don't know, also why don't we just give everybody flint so they're
Yes.
not starving and they can actually compete and play the game."
Sleep and eat
Mhm.
and yeah. So, yes, all these things I know, you people have heard them on different podcasts. They've heard them from us before. But yes, that I believe that is why this season has dragged a little bit compared to other seasons.
Yeah.
I just think it's the way the story has come together or come apart. Um, yeah. Now, before we move forward, it's time for yet another disclaimer. Because, as I mentioned last week, whenever we criticize someone's game, we sometimes hear from people who accuse us of hating on them or disliking them personally or something of that nature. That is not true. And if it is true, we'll let you know. But it's generally not true.
Mhm.
Badu, as we've already said once, seems like a really sweet, nice guy. We
Mhm.
are not here to judge sweet and nice. And while some of the interviews have seemed like a nice warm hug from the survivor press to him, we are not going to be doing that.
We don't hug.
No. Some of what we're going to say is going to sound mean if people
Yes.
want to take it that way. But that's because we are objectively evaluating his game. And
Mhm.
spoiler alert, it was bad. So I just want everyone to keep that in mind as we proceed.
Yes, please.
But before we get to how Banu did, we want to mention that the rules we're about to discuss come in a much more colorful version in poster form.
Mhm.
Go to robhitswebsite.com/yxlostfeed, scroll down to the poster and click on it. And then order it, and then it will be sent to you. It's
That's
just the
right.
way the world works. It's
It
magic.
is just the
Uh,
way the world works.
so then you can keep scrolling down, and you can get the poster on a T-shirt, which you can also click on and order. Or
Mhm.
you can get the poster on a checklist, which you can also click on and order. So again, go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed, and you can get everything you want.
I love it. And they should.
Yes. Now, before we move on, we all know that Banu said, I didn't come to win $1 million. I came to win 1,000,000 hearts.
Mm.
And he said it about 1,000,000 times. Um, he came for the journey. He came to share his story. All of that is his choice.
Mhm.
But remember, we are here to evaluate his game based on
Mhm.
trying to win.
Win.
I quoted from the introduction to my rules about that earlier. So, with that in mind, let's look at what Banu did wrong, what Banu didn't do right, and figure out overall why Banu lost.
Sneaky, sneaky. Oh, that was good. That was good.
Yes.
I'm sorry. And again, I'm laughing at David.
Yes.
Okay, he's funny.
Thank you.
Anyway,
All right. Well, the first and most important
I'm in
rule.
so much trouble. Oh my goodness. I'm so
Yes.
sorry.
The first, and I'm just going to say this again, the first and most important rule is to
Mhm.
scheme and plot. And I
Yes.
think Kenzie said it the best. He doesn't have a strategic bone in his sweet little body.
Right.
He loves the game, he loves to watch it, but it's different to play it. And Q
Yes.
also said he has a passion for the game, but he doesn't understand the game.
Mhm.
And this is, of course, this concept is something we've talked about from time to time in the past, including in our preview podcast when we saw some of this coming, and a lot more recently for some
Mm.
reason. Watching the TV show, even loving the TV show, in and of itself, does not make one good at playing the game
Mhm.
or understanding the game. Banu himself provided a big piece of evidence for that in his final words when he said, I'm a super fan of Survivor and I came here to be honest. Those two sentences should never be said
No,
together.
they can't be.
The second one disproves the first one
Right.
because any actual super fan would know you cannot play Survivor by being honest like he wanted.
Right. Yes. And I think that that's a lovely idea. And I think it's something that we've spoken about previously where people come into Survivor and they have an idea of how they want to play. And we've
Mm-hmm.
heard previous players say, well, I don't want to have to lie and I
Right.
don't want to have to be dishonest. But I always feel like there's like a little asterisk next to it when other players have said it because they realize that at some point I'm going to have to. And
Most of them,
everyone
yes.
has that moment when you're playing the game where you come to that first crossroad, right? Where you're like, "Oh, I have to lie." And it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel good. And I remember the first time I had to do it and you have to keep a straight face and you have to tell that person, "No, we're not voting for you." And I know that we are. But that's part of
Yeah.
Survivor, and that's part of what makes you a good player is your ability to adapt and also adjust and respond to other people in a way that allows you to play the game and not offend people in the process because you aren't throwing them under the bus,
Mm-hmm.
you aren't telling everybody what the plan is, you aren't negatively affecting someone else's game. And I feel like that was truly the biggest issue with Banu wanting to be honest is he's not the honesty that he wants to provide is not just affecting his game, it's affecting other
Right.
people as well. And so now you are taking the people that you need to be close to you and throwing them under the bus and telling people all about them because you want to be honest. And you can't develop the relationships that you need to have to go further in this game and being honest, because then you are honest to a fault of everyone, because
Right.
you are providing information on not just yourself but everybody who you're playing the game with.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Bhanu went even further into detail about his quest for honesty in interviews. He said mostly the same things about pretty much everything in almost every interview,
Mm,
at least the ones I saw. In this specific case about honesty, he told everyone how he's a super fan, there's that word again, who has
mhm,
watched every episode of every season. But he felt that how he saw people playing was not how he wanted to play. He insisted there's not just one way of playing, so he wanted to try something different and play his way, which was to see if honesty works. Well, several things here. He's right. There isn't just one way to play. There are
mhm.
definitely lots of different ways to play, but there are a lot more ways to not play.
Yes.
And he chose one of them. And the biggest problem, though, is if he had really paid attention while watching every episode of every season, he would have noticed he's not the first person to have this false epiphany and believe that they can play the game with honesty.
Mhm.
It's been tried and failed. We only need to go back to Survivor 43 and look at NECA.
Mhm.
She said in the preseason, even though the game is one where people very easily resort to lying and cheating and backstabbing, I see myself challenging how that is played and going with the opposite of that, and we'll see how that works out. Well, how did it work out? Well, let me quote from what I said in our Why NECA Lost podcast. Both of us predicted that it would work out the same way it almost always works out for someone who wants to come in and change the game. Not well. And we were right. I'm happy to say that NECA even recognizes it now, as she told interviewers that she no longer thinks it's possible to play the game without lying.
Mhm.
It's unfortunately too late for her, but hopefully future players can take note.
Yes.
Clearly, Bhanu did not take note.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just unfortunate. And again, your point is very valid. There are many ways that this game can be played, and we have seen so many players come at this game in different way. But if there is one thing that those players have in common, is they aren't being completely honest when they're
Yes.
playing the game. So there's that
And
that
they aren't
carries
trying
through.
to change the game.
Right.
You
Right.
have to play that's given to you.
Mhm.
You know, you can't play Monopoly and say, well, I think it's wrong to charge people rent. So I'm just, nobody's going to have to pay me. It's fine. I mean, you can play Monopoly that way.
You
You're
can, but
going to
guess what?
lose.
You're
Again,
losing.
again, the similarity there. Um,
Yes.
and the thing is, Banu's over honesty rather than strategy, and you touched on this, had an impact on every facet of his game. We
Mhm.
discussed last week how his tribe mates tried to explain to him that he could lie to Jeff and tribal council, but he just couldn't conceive of it. And, we'll discuss more of that in Rule 2. But as Kenzie said, he doesn't know how to play Survivor. Why did he come out here?
Mhm.
Bhanu said in tribal council that how to play the game didn't click with him for 6 days. My reaction to him saying that was, dude, it still hasn't clicked with you. Even now,
Yeah.
9 months after being voted out, it hasn't clicked.
Yeah. Well, I feel like now too, there was a lot of like Monday morning quarterbacking kind of things happening and like digging in and going, no, that's really what I wanted to do. And there was a reason why I wanted to do it. And I feel like he's maybe just getting like
But even
locked in,
even
even though he really shouldn't be.
but even that, he's still not giving the right answers. I mean, it would be
Oh,
one thing,
I don't disagree,
yeah,
but I'm saying is that he's trying to support his own initial cause, that like, "Oh, that was my goal,
yes,
was this is what I
yeah,
wanted to do, and that's how I played, and so I really did win in the long run."
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Okay.
okay.
Um, Now, before leaving this rule, there are two more things I want to mention. One is when he said, "I had so much power in the game, and now I'm like a puppet." I Well, I'm as confused as a goat on AstroTurf about that because I don't understand when he believed he ever had any power in the game, let alone so much. The
Yeah.
way he was playing didn't allow him to have any power in the game.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then the final thing, the cherry on top of it all, was that there was one strategic thing Banu could have tried to do to save himself. And no, I'm not talking about begging on his knees or yelling at God, but he knew a piece of valuable information, which was that Q wanted Kenzie gone and was planning to make that move, at least
Mm,
as far as Banu knew, if Randon hadn't been medevaced. If he wanted to stay, he should have mentioned this to Kenzie and tried to flip her against Q. And this
mm,
would have been interesting because, of course, she would have spoken to Tiffany. And then we could have seen some drama there.
yeah, but
But
that requires some strategy.
exactly, heaven forbid that he do anything like that.
Yeah. No, instead it was going to each
Please,
person and kind of
please.
right, begging
Yes.
them to keep him. And
Which
here's
is
the
not
thing, like
strategic.
it is not strategic, and I don't want to belittle him
Mhm.
or that because obviously he was very emotional at that point. But just merely asking someone to keep you around is not a reason to keep you around
Right.
for that person. That person needs to have a reason why keeping Banu will benefit them versus
And
getting rid of Banu.
the reason is never going to be because you were begging me on your knees.
Right.
I mean,
And
it
this
clearly
was
made Tiffany feel uncomfortable. She's like, I'm not
right.
even talking to you with you doing that, you
Right.
know?
I think it made people watching uncomfortable that
Yes.
this is never the gameplay that you want to be putting forth. You're certainly not changing the game by doing this. And you're not helping yourself at all because there has to be a reason why someone will keep you
Right.
as opposed to keeping that person over there. And yes, what you've just mentioned could have worked because it could have been like,
Mhm.
hey, guess what? He wanted to get rid of you, Kenzie, and I didn't, but he thinks that I'm with him. So yes, there could have been some more
Yeah.
drama. There could have been shifting and maybe making people look elsewhere, but none of that existed. And so for everyone who was left, for Q and Kenzie and
Mhm.
Tiffany, they were looking at him going, "What is he offering us? Literally nothing.
Right.
Yes, he's doing well in challenges, but he's
Well,
telling the other
well, put a pause on that.
we'll put a pause on that. Um, but he's telling the other tribes how like what we're
Mhm.
doing and who's close and who's running the show and he's wrecking our games, making us targets. I
Mhm.
mean, so all of this is not good for them. And so they had no reason to want to keep him.
Right. Right. All right. Well, we can move to the second rule, which says not to scheme and plot too much. At first glance, you may think Banu obviously didn't have any problem because he couldn't even figure out how to scheme and plot, let alone do it too much. But then we get to the second part, which I usually read as one sentence, and it says, keep your scheming secret.
Mm,
He certainly had a big problem there. And you, like I said, you touched on it already because we know he went on the journey and spilled his guts about his whole tribe. And he said in interviews that he did it because he was emotional and he didn't feel he could properly express those emotions on his own tribe because they would criticize him. So when he met with Ben and Liz, it all came out. As he told Mike Bloom, I didn't think, okay, what I'm saying or doing will impact the game moving forward. I just wanted to get it out of my system. Yeah, that pretty much says it all. He didn't think about it impacting the game moving forward.
mhm. Yeah. And not just his game again,
Right.
everyone else's game. And I think it's fascinating too because we got to see what happened after the journey with the two individuals,
Mm-hmm.
Liz and who
Ben.
was it Ben? The immediacy of when they went
Right.
back and they were like, "So he told us like everything."
Yeah.
And they just shared all of the dirty laundry from what was coming. And Ben was even I didn't say anything about us because Ben's like,
Yeah.
I didn't need to. He kept talking the whole time. And so that's something like you can't unring that bell, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now everybody has heard everything about what's going on with Kenzie and Q and Tiffany. And so if they do end up switching things up, everyone
Yeah.
is going to
Oh,
have
yeah.
that knowledge. Everyone has that basis of knowledge. And so, yes, he's put them all in a very difficult place.
Yeah. And then he found a way to make it worse by telling Tiffany and Q
Yeah.
about what he had said.
Right.
Now, on the one hand, he said in interviews that he did it because he wanted to be open and honest with them because they could find out about it later. Okay, maybe. But on the other hand, and this may be some of the mm, retro thinking here,
Monday morning quarterbacking
well,
kind
I
of
always think
thing?
of Monday morning quarterbacking as that you weren't actually the quarterback. You're sitting there saying what the
Oh, that's
quarterback should have
fair.
done.
Sure.
I
Yeah,
could be
that's
wrong
fair.
about that, but so I'm trying to think of the right word for it, but retroactively explaining,
Right.
himself.
Mhm.
And so this is where that comes in because he told them, or when he told them, and saw the looks on their faces, he said, "Did I do something wrong?" And
Right.
meanwhile, Q was doing just an epic facepalm. Epic facepalm. Banu could not understand how telling the other tribes about all the relationships in Yanu could possibly
Mhm.
be a problem. He simply did not get it.
And I just wanna say too, for someone who wanted to be honest and
Mhm.
not lie, I feel like in that moment he lied because he was like, "That was all I said."
Right.
That was not all he said.
Yeah.
He said a whole lot more.
Yeah. Now, despite Banu saying to us that he ruined his game in just a few minutes of saying these things, of course, this wasn't the first time it happened. Kenzie mentioned at the beginning of last episode that he shot from the hip and gave away secrets at tribal council. Tiffany had told him that they wouldn't let him know about the fake idol, so he wouldn't blurt it out. Heck, the only thing that surprised me about Banu telling all the secrets on the journey was that his tribe mates were in the least bit surprised to find out he told all the secrets on the journey.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
so, and the worst part is not just the problem of Banu giving away all the information. It is, like I said, that he gave away all the information. It was
It
failing
was
to
it was
keep
a double whammy.
yeah, failing to keep information secret squared. You know, Kenzie said at a previous tribal council, we have to choose who we can play with long term. And this is certainly no way to get someone to believe that they can play with you long term. I mean,
Mhm.
Tiffany flat out told Banu she was voting him out because she couldn't trust him.
Right. Yeah. I think that's pretty, that's being very honest.
Yes. Yeah. There's the honesty you wanted. And that's basically what she said. Look, I'm being honest with you here.
Yeah.
Now, again, before we leave this rule, there was one scene where Banu was apparently speaking to God. And he said, if I'm taking any wrong steps, please help me. In my head, God would have responded, if you've taken any wrong steps, man, you're beyond even my help.
Oh, David.
I mean, but that's the point. If,
Yeah.
if
If.
he knew he had taken, or he should have known he had taken wrong steps. It's
Yes.
like the person who quote unquote apologizes and says, if I've done anything to offend you, I apologize. That's not an apology because you don't even realize you offended
Right.
them.
Yeah, like, you need to know what you did wrong.
Right.
And I do think that there was this very strange, I don't even know how to really describe it appropriately, but that it was like he would have a moment of clarity and then it would go away.
Yeah.
You know, where, like, what he
Mm.
said is, like, "Oh, did I do something wrong?" Yes, you did something wrong. But then he would, like, forget about it 2 seconds later and would be doing something very similar
Right.
or of the same in the same vein, and you're like, "Wait, do you remember just this just happened over here. Did you not remember what just happened over here?" And so it was very strange to watch all of it unfold because I was like, are things are we not in linear time? Are things not happening in the right order?" It was very, very difficult to follow, I will
Well,
say.
and even when Tiffany and Kenzie were talking, when Tiffany told Kenzie he spilled everything, and I believe Kenzie was like, right after we talked to him about saying too much,
Yes, and
she was shocked too.
so this is why I'm like, it's head
Yeah.
scratching. It was just head scratching to see these things, and maybe this is why people were thinking he was an actor because it literally didn't make sense. Like, why would you do something that you were just told don't do that,
Yeah.
and then be shocked when they told you you're not supposed to do that, and then be like, "Oh, I did do something wrong." Yes,
Yeah.
we've already explained this to you.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the character on, oh gosh. Now I'm blanking. It's a sitcom from years ago where he said, did I do that?
Oh,
Uh,
is that from, is that SNL? Is
no,
that a skit?
no,
No.
it's a sitcom. I
Oh,
can
it's Steve Urkel.
yes, Urkel. Yes,
Steve Urkel.
yes,
Yes.
yeah. All right. Well, Jessica, the third rule
Yes.
tells players to be flexible. Tell us all the ways Banu was flexible.
Oh gosh.
All the
Seriously?
ways.
All the
All of
ways?
them.
All the
All
ways.
of them.
Maybe he could have prayed in a different location or something. I'm not sure. Maybe he could have talked
No,
to the guy
the
driving the boat, and
the
maybe
way
he
he
could have
was
told.
flexible, the ways he was
Oh
flexible,
gosh, no,
all the ways he was flexible.
I'm
I'll give
I'm
you
gonna
the
go.
next 5 minutes.
Listen,
Go ahead.
I know. Here's the problem. It's this is gonna sound crazy, but it was like he was too flexible. If
Hmm.
that makes any
Ah,
sense. In the no, in his willingness to just, I'm just going to discount what everyone has told me over here,
well,
and then I'm gonna do this over here, and then I'm gonna come back and be like, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that, even though I did that over here. That's what I'm talking about. I can't. I don't really think that this rule applies to Banu like at all because
well, it applies. He just, I
it
he was
doesn't make any sense.
right. I believe he was absolutely inflexible. He came in believing he could play with honesty. He would not accept or comprehend anything other than that. And, I mean, we already discussed how he couldn't possibly lie to Jeff in tribal council or,
Sure.
strategize in any way. He came in with this box. He put
Yes.
himself in this box and he stayed in that box. And I still think he's
But
in that box.
well, he's in that box, but he's also like acting like he's not in that box. If that, like, there's, I mean, there's something like very, very difficult. I just feel like this is my, I mean, this could be just my own opinion, but when when someone is explaining to you over and over and over again what you're doing wrong, and he had said in his exit interviews that he played along with them. He's like, "Oh, they said they wanted to teach me and they wanted to
Mm-hmm.
tell me how to play the game, and so I let them and I let them." No, that's not true. Like it's just not true.
Yeah.
And I just feel like there was just something there was just something just I don't really know even how to properly
Well,
describe it, but
I that's where I go back to being completely inflexible.
yeah.
He was talking to him was talking to a wall when it came to
Well,
strategy.
I guess that's the best way to describe it then because
Yeah.
it really made no sense at all.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's give you another chance here with rule 4. As the fourth rule tells players not to let their emotions control him. Do you think Banu had any issues with emotions at all?
Um, yes.
What?
Yes, I do.
How could you say that?
I mean, just a little bit, right? Just a smidge. Just a smidgen. Let's talk about that box again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely see the issue here for Banu that he had relative to his emotions because one, he couldn't keep them in check, and as you've already said, he came into this game with a very set idea of
Mhm.
what he wanted to be, and I do think that his decisions and how he was interacting with people, reacting to people, talking to people,
Mhm.
it all stemmed from an emotional place as opposed to a strategic place, which we've already talked about, that there was no strategy. It was more of a knee jerk reaction if he was upset. I mean, can we talk about the coconut scene for 2 seconds? When, like, I mean, what was that? Like, what was that? When she was like, Bono, are you okay? No, here. And he walks
Yeah.
away and gives her a coconut. Like, what just happened? This is why I'm struggling so much here because, again, he's a great person. He's a lovely human being. But the actual game that was being played, head scratching, just
Yes.
head scratching. So, yes, lots of emotional decisions being made by Banu for sure.
Yeah. While Banu complained to Ben and Liz on the jury that his tribe mates said he's not strategic, only emotional, he also admitted multiple times that he's an emotional person. So
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure what he was complaining about because,
Yeah.
yes, he's emotional. In fact, I would say overly emotional.
Yeah.
Because in addition to that coconut scene, we also saw him storm off and complain that Kenzie supposedly snapped at him for no reason. Okay, first, that was the mildest so called snap I've ever seen.
Right.
Second, There was a reason. He was being annoying, and she just asked him to please give her a few minutes.
Right.
And then he
Yeah, and the
stormed
other
off.
yeah, and the other thing that I thought was interesting, so you just made me think of this because she immediately like went and apologized. She
Mhm.
told Q, she's like, I'm going to need to apologize to him just because I'm going to need to, he's going to need to feel better about this.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how his tribe mates lacked empathy, which I
Yes.
thought was fascinating
Yes.
considering
Talked about in his
everything.
interviews. Yes.
Yes, everything that they were doing for him and trying
Mhm.
to help him and taking time out of their own games to try to improve his game. Now, granted, I'm sure they were doing it for a
Oh,
selfish
they
reason
were.
or a little bit of a
Yeah.
selfish reason because they want to go further
Mhm.
in the game. But for him to think that they were not empathetic, I was a little taken aback because I think that
Yes.
they went above and beyond trying to help him and coddle him a little bit and make him
Yes.
feel
That's
better,
exactly the
and
word I have.
see, there we are.
Yeah.
So so there is something again that just didn't make sense to hear him say that when we were able to observe everything that they
Right.
were doing for
Yeah,
him.
if he had said that during the game, fine, whatever. I wouldn't
Sure.
probably wouldn't have mentioned it. You probably wouldn't have mentioned it. But the fact that he's repeatedly saying it now tells me
Mhm.
he still just doesn't get it.
Yeah.
Even aside from what you just said, Survivor is not therapy.
No.
The other players are not there to support and coddle you. Yes,
Mhm.
it's possible that will happen. We've seen Siga being incredibly supportive of each other, but
Mhm.
we also have to remember they haven't gone to tribal council yet.
Right.
Survivor is a game. It is not group therapy. You can choose to view it as an experience, which is clearly what Bhanu has done. You cannot, however, impose your view on others because that's not why most of them are there. They are
Right.
not there to help you, they are
Right.
there to help themselves.
Right. And this isn't to say that there are never moments in
Right,
Survivor when you need to or that you shouldn't
right.
ever support anyone because there are definitely moments in the game where you do need to help each other out and you do need you need to take those moments and kind of rebuild your team and get everybody on the same page. So that's totally separate than what we saw happening with Banu because it was a
Right.
very individualized need for him and him only. It wasn't tribe
Mhm,
related, it wasn't strategic. It was like we just got to keep him on the straight and narrow because he's going to blow up all of our games.
mhm.
And so I there are moments where you need to support each other 100%. But in to this extent and this specialized and trying to kind of coach him and train him, that's a
And
whole
to the
different
point
thing.
of walking on eggs around him so you can't
Yes.
say anything like that. I had an
And
employee.
having him like quote
Yeah,
lines so he would know
right,
what to say when he goes to
right.
tribal council. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a lot.
yeah. I had an employee who was, I mean, some of us nicknamed her Eggy because you had to walk on eggshells whenever she was there because heaven forbid you say something that she took slight offense to, she would be like, she would storm off and you'd be like, what just
Mhm.
happened?
Yeah.
You know? And yeah, it- at work, at least, yes, I want to support my employees.
Right.
Survivor, you don't even necessarily have that.
Well, and honestly too, to their credit,
Hmm.
they
They
should all
were,
be like, "Great.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Keep going down this path, Banu, because you're just making it easier for me to stay and for other people because we're all going
Hmm.
to vote you out." So that's the other part that I think really should be highlighted is that yes, well they were coming at it from maybe a selfish standpoint because they wanted to also save themselves. They could have just been like, "Who cares? He can get
Right.
voted out. It's fine."
Yeah. Yeah. Now, one more thing I need to address in this rule is the way Banu's emotions led him to being mad at God for giving him only one miracle and not another one to keep him
Sorry,
around.
Randon.
Well, that's exactly it. How many people does Banu want God to injure for him so he can stay in the
Right.
game?
Right.
You know, so I know it was, the different stages of grief, and one of them was anger and this and that. But come on, man. It was bad enough the first time. It's worse now.
Yeah.
And that's just emotions absolutely running away.
Mhm.
All right. Well, the fifth rule uh, reminds players they need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. It is pretty obvious that Banu did not need to pretend to be nice because, as we
Mhm.
have both said, he really is a nice guy.
Mhm.
Too nice for this game, really. Uh,
Yeah.
even Jess told Rob a couple weeks ago about how nice he was because some people were getting mad at him for yelling at her in that block the arch challenge.
Mhm.
So yes, he is nice, but just being nice does not equate to having a good social game.
Yeah.
We talked in Rule 4 about how he got mad at Kenzie and stormed off. We just spent a bunch of time talking about that because she wasn't catering to his behavior to the point that she felt she had to go apologize to him. And again, it's this walking on eggshells thing.
Mhm.
And it was only further hurting his game. It was not helping it.
Yeah. And I think that that is a very good distinction to make, that you can be nice and still have a very bad social game,
Yeah.
because you need to be able to meld the two things together.
Hmm.
And he was definitely failing at doing so.
Yeah. All right, we'll move ahead to the sixth rule, which warns against being too much of a threat. Now, Banu was not the typical type of threat that we usually think of in this rule. He wasn't going to purposely backstab one of his allies or win the game, but he did accidentally backstab his allies and could have cost them the game. He was the type of
Mm,
threat who hurts everyone else in the tribe because of his inability to play the game, as you mentioned, and also, which I'll get to a little bit more in Appendix A, issues and challenges.
yeah.
They simply could not trust him in any capacity.
Well, and I think that's the scariest type of threat to
Yes.
have, is the ignorant threat, right? It's not the person who is purposefully backstabbing
Right.
and going behind your back and trying to, like, play both
Mhm.
sides. It's not that person. It's the person that doesn't even realize the damage that they're creating by carrying out this, "I just wanna be honest,
Right.
and I just wanna be able to speak to whomever about whatever and about whoever,"
Mhm.
that that is the true, like, scariest, biggest threat for an individual, because he doesn't even realize the damage that he's creating.
Yeah, and it's not predictable, it's not controllable.
Right.
You can predict that certain players will come after you. You can't
Mhm.
predict what Banu is going to say.
Right. Right.
All right, well, the seventh rule covers idols and advantages in game mechanics. Banu didn't have any luck finding an idol, mostly because Tiffany already had it and because God wouldn't plant another one for him. Uh, Nor did he have any luck begging others to get one for him. Of course, we know he went on his journey and wasn't able to solve the puzzle, causing him to lose his vote. But as we discussed much earlier, he didn't ask to go on that journey. He didn't ask to play the puzzle game.
Right.
That was not his choice.
Yeah.
But he bears responsibility for what he said on that journey, which,
Mhm.
we've spent a few minutes discussing already.
Just a few.
Just a few. So I
I
don't know.
got nothing to add.
Okay. Well, then we'll go to Appendix A, which is about the players keeping their end goals in mind when voting. And we talk about voting out the weak, then the strong, then the weak, then the strong. There was no doubt about this vote. They had to get rid of the person who was the weak in every
Mhm.
possible game way.
Yeah.
Because besides everything we've already discussed, I contend he had problems in the challenges, despite what he claimed in interviews. He said he did well. The cameras said otherwise. He cost his team precious time in the immunity challenge by forgetting the
Oh,
rules.
I did forget about that.
Yeah, and going
Okay.
around the stack crates
Yes.
instead of
Yeah.
over them.
Yeah.
Why did he think they were there? Like, what were you doing? He ran around them and dove in. They're there for a reason. Everybody else is jumping over them. What are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then later in that same challenge, when he was the ball retriever for any shots that Q missed, he was moving so slowly that they subbed him out.
Yeah.
I mean,
I will say that is a very difficult thing to do from experience when you're really tired and you're treading water and you're
yeah,
like, "I gotta get that ball now." It's hard.
I'm sure it is, but the others managed, and he
I
was
know. I know.
specifically called out in particular,
Yes.
So even aside from the complete lack of trust he had with anyone at this point, they might have decided to vote him out just based on the challenge. Combined with everything else, it was a no doubter.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
All right. So it's about time to wrap things up. Jessica, what are your final thoughts on Bhanu?
Oh, Banu. As I said at the beginning of this podcast,
I
I
thought you were going
do
to
think
stop there and that was going to be your whole conclusion. Oh, Bhanu.
done. Um, I I do truly think that Banu's t-shirt represents the existence that he wants to have both in
Yes.
his life and in Survivor, and that is to be kind. Unfortunately, I don't associate be kind with the game of Survivor because it's
Mm-mm.
an impossible mix. You can be kind in Survivor, but you can't always be kind. And you need to bring a strategic component to the game. And you can play it off as being kind. You can hide it behind your kindness. You can try to make people not realize what you're doing because you are kind, but in the end, everyone who plays Survivor has to backstab, has to be dishonest, has to do something in order to further their game, in the process taking others out. And that's what makes Survivor so fantastic. And that's what makes it a game that we all return to and we love, is because of that component. It's a very, very difficult thing for anyone to do because Survivor is not real life. And in real life, you wouldn't purposefully throw people under the bus. You wouldn't try to backstab. You wouldn't do these things to
I mean,
bring someone else
speak for
down.
yourself here a little bit, but yeah.
Okay, maybe you shouldn't do those things in real life.
Again,
But in
speak for yourself,
Survivor,
but
all right. In Survivor, you 100% have to because you have to play to win and you have to play to get to the end and to win. And so I just feel for Banu because I really do think he came in with this idea, this I can be honest and I can play this game with the integrity that I seek. And in the end, we all saw what happened and it just went, it didn't work. And I really do think that the people that were on his tribe with him tried so hard to
Mhm.
save it. They tried so hard to help him. And he was just very set in his ways and really desirous of creating this survivor game that just cannot exist. So, in the end, Banu, thank you for playing. Maybe like I'm not trying to be mean, but like this is not the game for you. It's just not.
Yeah.
This is not a game that is for an individual such as Banu, but I appreciate his story. I appreciate him sharing, putting himself out there, and he seems like a lovely human being, but just not someone who is wired appropriately to play Survivor.
Yes. I said before we got into the rules that some of what we were talking about was likely to sound mean to some people. But again, this was as objective an evaluation as we could possibly make for him. Outside the game, Banu the person seems to be a kind human being.
Mhm.
Inside the game, he was an absolutely terrible player. He came in saying he was a super fan, but wanted to ignore everything he'd seen since season 1 and change the way Survivor was played. That always has the same ending. Some people who've tried in the past have realized the error of their ways, like NECA from Survivor 43. I'm still not sure Banu does. Even though he said before Tribal Council, I realize that honesty has no meaning in this game. I truly believe if for some reason he were brought back, he would play the same way again. It's
Mm.
too deeply ingrained in him to put it aside for playing a game. As Tiffany said, if you want to win a million hearts, go volunteer. Even Jeff said on his podcast, Banu drove his tribe mates crazy. That was clear. But it's not because he was a compassionate, caring person. He drove them crazy because of his lack of gameplay abilities. This is Jeff talking about gameplay abilities. That's how far
And
we've
he's
gone
your
here.
guru.
Yes. The ability to put aside your emotions, your honesty, parts of you that you cherish in everyday life, all of that is necessary to, again, to put it away for Survivor. Leading up to Tribal Council, Banu said, a momentary truth caused so much. And he added, 5 seconds of my honesty ruined my game. No, it didn't. There was a lot more than that ruining his game. It was just the final straw.
There's
As
lots of
Bhanu,
seconds.
yeah. As Bhanu himself said in Tribal Council, I don't have anything. I don't have a vote. I don't have an idol. I don't have alliances. I screwed up this game big time. I can't disagree with that. I do believe Bhanu loves Survivor, but he loves Survivor, the TV show. He doesn't comprehend how to play Survivor, the game. He had a very
Mm.
emotional journey and story. And as I said, outside the game, he seems like an incredibly nice person, but he's still really bad at Survivor. And that is why Bhanu lost.
I think that's a very interesting point about
Mm-hmm.
that he loves watching the game.
Yes.
And I do think that there are people, and I've had conversations with people like this where they're like, "Oh, I love watching Survivor. I could never play it."
Mm-hmm.
And that I think is a very
Good.
good
I'm glad they
I
recognize it.
right.
Yeah.
Like to have that realization about yourself, like, no, I love the game and
Mm-hmm.
I watch it all the time, but I could never play that. I can
Yeah.
never play that game. I think that's a great point to make that yes, you can be a super fan, but that doesn't mean you're going to be great at the game.
Right. And again, it comes down to, and this is not something I, want to re-debate again. What is a super fan? To me, a
Mm-hmm.
super fan is not just someone who has watched every episode of the show,
Right.
but maybe even if you don't listen to podcasts, even if you don't do anything, maybe read some interviews. So he would have seen what happened with NECA
Right.
as
Right.
just one example, because that one just jumped out at me.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
it was 2 seasons ago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, before he got on, it
Right.
so. All right. Well, before we get to our predictions for the next episode,
Mm.
remember to make sure you stick around for that. Um, Let me remind everyone that the rules we just discussed are available in poster form.
Yes, they
Go
are.
to robhasawebsite.com/yxlost feed and scroll down, click on it, order it. And you can do the same with the poster on a t-shirt or and the poster on the checklist, sorry, on a t-shirt. Oof. I am just well, I just realized that I was reading the um the the page to get us, and I just realized that I forgot to put the YX Lost feed and Y blank
Oh,
Lost logo on the video. So that kind of discombobulated me for a moment there.
gosh darn it, Bloomberg.
Yes. Um
Better late than never.
yes. Yes. But besides going to robhasawebsite.com/yx lost feed, there are other ways people can get a hold of us.
Yes, there are. You can follow me at JessicaLewis89 on Twitter. You can also follow David Bloomberg at David Bloomberg. I am also on Instagram at JessicaLewis6789. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. I steal a lot of his content from my stories because it's super lovely and super helpful. So I appreciate that greatly. But David Bloomberg is all over social media and seems to just continue to expand and develop more areas in which to post videos and to get his content out there. And so he has his linked tree information that he's just put up on the screen for
Yes,
those of you watching.
Linktree, which
Link
is
tree.
Linktree, Linktree/David Bloomberg, with a dot before the EE in Linktree. Or you could find me on most text-based social media like Twitter and Blue Sky as at David Bloomberg. And on the video platforms, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram is at David Bloomberg TV, which is also my Threads name because it's connected to Instagram. And you said that I've been expanding, but I actually knocked off one. I stopped
I know,
posting to post. I am not on post, or I am on post, but I was not getting anywhere on post. So I got rid of that. And
but you continue to try.
yes. Um, and yeah, I've been posting, 3 or sometimes even 4 videos per day at TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram.
And
Right
maybe
now,
that's where my statement comes from because I will
yes.
say when I go through my TikTok For You page, you're all over my For You
Well,
page,
good,
just so
good.
you know.
Just keep liking and sharing, liking and
I
sharing.
do. I do.
And I'm everybody. I mean, and yeah, so I'm posting right now clips, of course, from U.S. Survivor, plus other shows like The Amazing Race, Deal or No Deal Island. I just finished posting videos from Australian Survivor, including the whole season of mini Why Blank Lost, and of course a Why
Mm.
Blank Won. Um, Speaking of Australian Survivor, I joined Sarah Carradine on Silent Podcasts to discuss the final week, the final 5 players, and a really, really great season overall. This is probably the best season of
Oh,
Australian Survivor yet.
can I just tell you how jealous I was to see their final, like, immunity challenge?
Really?
Like,
It's torture. It was literal torture.
but that's why I loved it.
Oh, okay.
Like, this is what US Survivor needs to go back to.
Torturing
Torture.
people?
Come on. I'm sorry, but when you put if you wanna know who wants to win,
Well, yeah.
oh, give them something that they really have to dig. You've gotta get it from inside to,
Well,
like,
the dig was the posts, the little pointy
well,
things
yes,
digging into their
it
feet,
was
you know?
it was definite
Yeah.
definite torture, but my gosh, that's what we need
Yeah.
in US Survivor. 100%. Love that. Mhm. Anyway.
All right. Well, it is time for predictions. And
Mm.
it's
You
interesting.
know, you did so well last week. You should just go first.
Well, I will. Um,
Okay, good.
I figure I almost always go first unless you get a prediction right, and then I let you go first the next week, which means I almost never let you go first. Um, so,
Fair.
yeah,
Very fair.
but this week is
Jessica,
interesting.
since you're so bad at it, you
Yeah,
never get to go
exactly.
first.
Because I- I've been right in each of them so far, but we're entering a new phase in the season, a post
Mm,
Banu era, where
mhm.
we could finally get on with the game, maybe.
Maybe.
Now, of course,
Oh,
it's possible Yanu will lose yet again. But especially if there is a reward challenge, the other 2 tribes will have to sit out at least some of their better players just because Yanu only has 3. One tribe's going to have to sit out literally half of their
you
tribe.
don't think they're gonna do a swap?
No, not at this point.
Really?
I don't think there will be a swap at this point because I think they'll merge after like one more vote. Because what are we now? We're at 5-4-3.
Yeah.
So that's 12. I think they'll do, yeah, they usually do the mergatory at 11 because you
Mm,
have the 5 and 5 and 1, right? And
I don't like this
uh
math.
yeah, so yeah, I don't think, I mean, he could fool us and there could be because they're down to 3, but I just don't think so. Um so but with that said, I think Yanu will finally succeed. And then the question is which tribe doesn't? My guess is it will be Siga who loses.
Mm,
Um, we saw how Jem turned the target on Tim somewhat. And we also know that tribe is split men versus women, except for Charlie and Maria in the middle. I think that those 2 will go with the women and take out Tim, despite the preview showing Tim accusing Jem of planting the fake beware advantage, which she did, but he needs numbers to support him on that. And I don't think he has those numbers,
mhm,
especially since Ben lost his vote. So that's even one less number.
mm. These are all very valid points.
So, yes, I think it will be Tim, who I will say, at least I will say he has a good sense of humor about himself. I today posted a TikTok of him falling off the platform in the water repeatedly during the reward challenge.
Oh my gosh, you
And
really did too.
and I set it to the music of Under the Sea. And so he liked it so much he put it on his own story. So
Nice. Oh,
um
that's
yeah,
good.
so it's good to have a good sense of humor about yourself. But unfortunately, Tim, my prediction is you're next.
Mm. I'm sticking with there's gonna be a swap.
Okay.
Because here's the thing. I wanna believe that production is like, "God, we gotta do something with this because this is getting bad." Like, I really wanna believe that that's what they're looking at and going, "We need to switch something." I just want to. I want to so badly. And so, I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna stick with it even though the numbers do not, point in that direction. I believe that Survivor production is listening and paying attention and realizing that the game show that they have created is just not that much fun when it's repetitive in this way. So let's keep everybody guessing and let's do a swap, even though people are now counting on their fingers and figuring out how many players are left and going, that's not usually how they do this, just to keep it interesting. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think we can do a little swappy swap. And here's what my thought is with that swappy swap. Oh, here's my idea. Okay, because I talked about this before, how everyone's going to be focusing on Kenzie, right? Because she's been thrown under the bus as like
Right.
the social butterfly. But I think Kenzie is good enough to save herself. And I think Kenzie, in my worldview, will be able to save herself. But I feel like Q will not be able to.
Ooh.
I feel like
That
the
would be
information.
bad because Q just today came out with a new merchandise on his website. So that
Oh,
would be bad if he came out with it, just before he's about to go throw
really?
that out. Yes.
Gosh. So maybe I shouldn't say this
Oh,
then.
damn it!
But
I
I
should have
just
made you go all the way without giving you that
no,
information.
but here's the thing. Like I think it's going to end up coming down to if they do a swap, which they're probably not going to do, but this is in Jessica's world. They're
Mhm.
going to do the swap. And then you've got some permutation where you have,
Mhm.
Kenzie and Tiffany and Q all have to end up somewhere. And I just feel like, and maybe Q came out with his merchandise because he knows next week is it for him. That's what it is. So he's like, I gotta get on this train now. I gotta start selling shit because I'm almost out the door. And maybe people will feel bad for me because I got voted out and then they'll buy my stuff. It's Q. See, you just
Okay.
sold it. You
All
just
right.
made
There you
me
go.
convince myself.
Okay, good. I purposely tried to get you to convince yourself of the wrong answer. That was my trick.
You did a great job.
I should be on Survivor. Uh,
It's crazy.
well,
It's a crazy idea.
well, if I do that, I'm going to change the game. I'm going to play honestly. I'm going to ignore all my rules, and I'm just going to, because nobody will expect it from me.
Could you imagine if David Bloomberg stepped on that map? People would be like, wait a second. It's David Bloomberg. He made the rules of Survivor.
And then they'd vote me out, and all of them would come up and write my name down and go, and this is why David lost. So because yeah, they would have to,
Yeah, that's
so
it.
yeah, and
David,
then
you're wrong.
I'd have to wear this shirt.
Yes.
I would just wear this shirt there. That's you know why you lost. So.
It's
All right. Well,
fantastic.
as we wrap up, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Um, there are tons of special podcasts that are put out there just for patrons. Like this season, there's always the 5 for 5 where Rob talks to his wife, Nicole, or in this case, he talked to his son about all things Survivor and Amazing Race and other stuff. Plus, there's the Survivor feedback show, which the strategic aspect of that discussion is patron only, and
Mm.
there's lots of other things as well. So again, to get all of that extra great content and to support shows on the network, including ours, go to robhasawebsite.com/patron. And also make sure you're subscribed to all of the reality TV RHAP Up podcasts by going to robhasawebsite.com/RHAP feed and selecting your podcast service of choice. You will, of course, find us there. Plus the B&B, Survivor International, and also podcasts on a number of other shows and topics. Big Brother Canada is going on now, and all the other different shows. So, you know, make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss any podcasts.
Yes, you definitely should subscribe. There's incredible content that is put out by RHAP, and we would like to thank everyone who does all of the editing, not just for the Why Blink Lost podcast, but all of the content that you've just heard discussed and then some. Thank you to Scott St. Pierre for the editing and all of the help that he does receive as well. Thank you to everyone who is supporting this podcast and all of the other podcasts that are on RHAP and all of the content. Thank you, Rob, for continuing to support all of the podcasters and allowing us to to continue to do what we love to do. And thank you, David, for humoring me in my selection of Q for this week and making me feel like maybe there's
A
a
slim chance.
smidge, just a little smidge.
Yes.
And that we got through this. And I know that, again, I just can't say it enough. Like, this is what David and I do is difficult because, as someone who was a player, I went through listening to people say things about me, like David Bloomberg. But that is part of when you put yourself out there and you play this game. People are going to watch the game you play and they're going to talk about it. And so that's what we're doing. We're trying to talk about it in a way that breaks it down and allows potential future players to consider the things that
Mhm.
we're saying and the rules that are put forth by David Bloomberg in their own games that they would hope to be on Survivor one day and play. So thank you for listening. We appreciate it.
Yes. Yes. Thank you to all our listeners. Thank you, Jessica, for another great episode. We will see everyone in a week. And of course, you can find me everywhere except Post. Until
Yes,
then,
everywhere.
everywhere. So we'll be right back here in a week. Bye.